Hello and welcome to another edition of Y-PAC Check-ins. I'm your host, Sean Davido, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Bob Harrison, the Yakima City Manager. Thanks for joining me today, Bob.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon.
Now, we are meeting virtually. This is my first time actually meeting you, and we're meeting virtually over the internet. That has been, it's one of the signs of our times right now, and that's one of the challenges. And you've come to Yakima in some extraordinarily challenging times. Can you just talk about that experience and that decision to come here in these times?
Yeah. Well, so, when I started my job search back in early summer and was thinking about Yakima as an opportunity, did some research on the community and quite honestly, loved what I heard. I think there's been many things that I've discovered during my first couple months here at the city that I've really been pleased with, and I've enjoyed this opportunity to get to know the staff and the community and the city council.
Now, let's talk a little bit. You are from the Midwest, but you've worked in Washington State and in city management recently and for most of your career. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I grew up in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee area, and I was there for most of my first 18 years, and then went to school, finished up, my grad school finally about 1994, and then started in city management. I worked in 3 different municipalities in Wisconsin at the beginning of my career, and then in 1998 I moved over to Wyoming, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cincinnati, and then in 2010 I moved out here to Washington State, where I was city administrator of Issaquah for 8 years, and then was at the city of Renton for a couple years before coming out here to Yakima.
Now, you came in an interesting time. You came in the middle of budget time, and that's one of the main focuses for a city manager, as I understand. So, can you talk about that in the process and just where we are now, and a little bit about where you came in? And I know the staff had done quite a bit of work.
Yeah, I mean, the budget was fairly well framed up at this point by the time I had joined the city. I think the primary goal that I had, and which I communicated to the finance director, and the team did a great job on the budget, but we were going to have a balanced budget, and that was pretty critical. That was a goal that the city council had, to make sure that the budget was balanced and that we could add to our reserves. And even in this, extraordinary times, where we had even, a couple bad months with sales tax collections, we did achieve those 2 goals, which is to balance the budget and to, be able to add a little bit of revenue to our reserves. The other piece of this, which a lot of cities weren't able to do, we've been able to generally maintain our staffing and, not have to do significant cuts to the budget or our personnel, which was important. I think that, certainly helped the morale of the city, employees. And so it's been, overall, I think the budget turned out pretty well. There's still some issues that we have to deal with. We've got some longer term challenges that we have to be able to incorporate some of those longer term challenges and the financing of those into our future budgets. And we made a commitment to the council. We'd go back to them, at least in the first quarter, to deal with a couple of those issues right away. But, I think there's been a variety of things the city's been challenged with. One is, long-term growth and investments that we've made over the years, and to see the impact of that growth. A lot of it was tourism related, obviously. And, with COVID, it did have an impact, obviously, on some of the revenues related to that tourism-related business. The other piece of that is, looking at our tax base and what's happened over the years. And there has been a few challenges as some businesses have moved out to other opportunities, which paid sales taxes to the city. And unfortunately, those developments didn't generate greater wealth for the region, but it did shift some tax base from the city of Yakima to, some neighboring cities. And that's a challenge when you start to look at, sales tax revenues over time. The loss of those revenues are, they're hard to make up.
Right. Now, we're going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about COVID numbers have been, it seems like, on the rise just a little bit. in across the state and across the country. And with some emergency declarations continuing here, what are the plans to open facilities? Are there plans? People are tired of being quarantined and sheltered, but we need to stay vigilant. There is a plan in place. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I would say our community did a wonderful job responding. You know, the county was at that phase 1.5 for a long time, and there was an initiative put forth by the city to mask up, and the city did a great job, and the community did a great job responding to that. And frankly, the governor commended this area several times for being able to make a very significant change in our numbers of infections and the positivity rate. You know, today, November 13th, I think it is, you know, when this interview was recorded, we're already starting to see some of our neighboring states, like in Oregon, impose lockdowns again. So while plans are important, and we do have some plans that we've been working on, the situation is so fluid that it's hard to say, you know, where we're going to be in a couple of weeks until we see a change in the overall numbers.
Exactly, and that is a challenge to move forward and to make long-term plans. Can you talk a little bit about where do you see the city short-term? You've talked a little bit about some of the budget stuff. Where do you see the city short-term, and even in some of the longer-term plans? I know it's fluid, but I'm sure,
Sure.
You do have a plan to move forward.
Yes, well, I think one of the most exciting pieces longer term is the mill site and the redevelopment of that. That's been a 14, 15-year redevelopment process, but the great news is that we've broken ground on that project, and we are in the process of cleaning up the solid waste at least where the street right away would be. And that's going to provide us some tremendous opportunity in future economic growth with jobs and additional tax base. So that's very exciting. It's also a real opportunity to put a new kind of presence on our front door, since that site has a very significant streetscape to Interstate 82. And so it's pretty amazing to have that opportunity to be, you know, really at the front end of the development piece. You know, the past 12 years have been preparation to see that redevelop. I think on a short-term basis, you know, we have to get through this pandemic and the impacts that have. I think the city has made some very good investments with the convention center, and, you know, the timing of having that remodeling occurring while a lot of conventions have been canceled. We were actually a little fortuitous there, just because we've been able to get that project moving on a much quicker basis. You know, short term, again, I think it's getting through the pandemic. It's helping me work and to get to know the community and to get to know our employees. You know, there's a lot of tools that city managers develop over the years on how to tackle different issues, whether it's economic development or finance or personnel development. And I've always thought, you know, what's most important is to get to know the community first and the priorities of that community. And then you can find the right tool that in your toolbox that you can use to help make a real difference. And so that's been my primary goal here the first few months, is to get to know the community and those really critical issues. I think I've been very impressed with our nonprofit sector. They're very strong. We have a really robust nonprofit sector in Yakima, and they help the city a lot in terms of being able to do outreach to those segments of our community that they serve. You know, I still see opportunities for growth, and I think like I mentioned, the mill site has that opportunity. But in some respects, I think we've got, you know, one of the goals we've got to find is developers that are willing to invest in segments of our community that are really opportunities, but for whatever reason, there's been either some hesitancy or you know, maybe lack of capital that's causing some maybe not as much investment as we would like to see. It's been good to see some new housing go in, but there's still huge demand on housing,
Yeah.
both affordable housing and regular housing, market rate housing here in the community.
Yeah.
The same with commercial. You can see new commercial development go in, and when that development has come in, it's been very successful. And there's real demand for those services. But there's still opportunities, I think infill opportunities within the city that we'd like to attract some more capital for people to be able to redevelop those sites.
Yes, definitely. I was just out on Butterfield Road and I saw some of the county's work that they're doing. It's a facelift. It is definitely even just that little bit. I looked down and saw the road work and it was like, that's interesting. And I can't wait for that whole area to develop on both sides, on the county side and on our city side that is ready for that development. And it will be a nice front door for us that Yakima deserves. So. Yeah. Now we've talked about a lot of stuff. Let's talk about, I got a little information from my supervisor, Randy Beeler. He says that you are from the Midwest and you mentioned that earlier. And he said that you've likened Yakima a little bit to some of those communities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's a few communities that I would say are somewhat familiar, somewhat similar to the Midwest. The biggest, I think, comparable is the ag.
Right.
Ag is the basis for the economy, and it's wonderful. We've got, world-class ag businesses that exist here in Yakima, which really underlie and underpin the, economic well-being of the community. So that's very good. But what's different about Yakima than some of those other communities I was thinking about in the Midwest is we've got some assets in this community that you see in major metropolitan areas. For example, the Capitol Theater. You look at the plays and the shows they're able to put on. It's just such a tremendous asset. Our museum that we've got here in town, again, just such a unique and tremendous cultural asset that we have in our community that a lot of places would just die to have those types of, facilities and those assets within their communities. And that's, I think, one of the things that really separates the city of Yakima from some of those other areas is the cultural institutions that have been built and invested in over time.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for that. Now let's talk about how people can get some information from the city. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, during this, pandemic time, one of the most critical resources for people is our website and online information that the city has made available. We still get some folks that pop up here at City Hall and find that the doors are closed because it's not accessible to the public per the governor's orders. So, certainly call first or check the website and before you make that trip down to City Hall and see if you can get your answers that way. And
the website is yakimawa.gov. And you can also contact the city manager's office. You can send Mr. Harrison an email at bob.harrison@yakimawa.gov, or you can call the city manager's office at 575-6000, and they would probably get a hold of Miss Callie Price, your assistant, correct?
Yeah, she's absolutely wonderful, and she'll help get a resolution to those questions that may pop up.
Right, and she's wonderful, and she's the right hand. She's been the right hand person of many city managers over the last few years. So
yeah, over a decade, I think. So it's been pretty good. Yep. Yeah.
So I just want to thank you again for joining me virtually. Someday we will meet in person, and I want to express my thanks for coming to our community and helping us move forward in these challenging times.
Well, thank you, Sean. I'm excited to be here, and I know from a personal perspective, I made the right choice to come to this great community and look forward to serving the public and continuing to make Yakima a wonderful place. And it is. So that makes the job a little bit easier when you're starting with a high bar already. You just want to make it a little higher. So it's great.
Yes, it's a wonderful city and a wonderful place to live. Thank you for joining us. And thank you all for joining us on this edition of Y-PAC Check-ins.